Hello, and welcome to A Storm is Brewing. In this fun game, we are going to try to guess what type of natural disaster is being shown in the photos in this video. So on your screen, you're going to see a photo appear, and you have to try to think of the type of natural disaster it is. Perhaps you've seen natural disasters happen around you. Maybe you've lived through one. Either way, they can be very scary, and they are a natural part of our planet and the earth that we live on. And depending on your area and region of where you live, chances are you've come across a few of these yourself or have known somebody. So I'm going to get started with our first picture. It's going to appear on the screen. What type of storm is this? Can you think of where that is? Where is that? If you guessed a hurricane, you are correct. So, one thing to know about hurricanes is that depending on where in the world you're located, hurricanes have different names. They're called different things. So, a hurricane is the name that's given to a system that develops over the Atlantic and Eastern Pacific Oceans. If you're in the Western North Pacific and Philippines, they are called typhoons. And if you're in the Indian and South Pacific Oceans, they're called cyclones. Growing up, I always thought that the three of those terms were all different, but they are not. They are all hurricanes, right? So with naming a hurricane, right, we know that they're all given a name. Usually they start off as tropical storms, and they use an alphabetical order when they give out names, right, to help track where the storms are and which ones are coming in faster than others. But if a hurricane is especially severe or very large, the name will actually be retired. Otherwise, within a 6-year period of time, they get recycled again. So for an example, we had a hurricane named Katrina, and it was pretty severe. It was a big storm. And so that name has now been retired. All right, so look at your screen now. What type of natural disaster is this one? What kind of storm is that? If you guessed tornado or twister, you are correct. So here in America, we have a place called Tornado Alley. If you're familiar with that term, you know that it's located in the Plains states, and it's one of the two regions in the U.S. With a higher number of tornadoes, right? So most of the 1,000 tornadoes that hit the U.S. on an annual basis occur in this area. So that's called Tornado Alley. Tornadoes can record winds up to 300 miles per hour, which is twice as fast as hurricanes. If you've ever talked to people who've been through a tornado, a lot of times they talk of the sound when it's approaching, right? Or when it's close by. They say it sounds like a railroad or a train on a railroad track. It's very loud. But it's probably from all of the debris that's being torn up, right? All right, next picture. What type of natural disaster is this? Right? This one has been around as long as dinosaurs, right? So this is a volcano, right? An eruption. So when a volcano erupts, it's releasing molten lava. It can reach temperatures of 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It's basically melted rock, which is known as magma. And this is its way of reaching the surface of the earth. All right, our next natural disaster. We're in the Gulf again. But what is this kind of storm? What does it look like to you? What does that look like? This is known as a tropical depression. A tropical depression is a storm that's considered not quite a hurricane. It's kind of just before that, but it's when wind speeds are less than 39 miles per hour. When the wind speeds exceed 39 miles per hour, the tropical depression is upgraded to a tropical storm, right? And we know what comes after a tropical storm, right? So at 75 miles per hour, that's when it gets into you're looking at a hurricane, right? All right. What is this here? What is this natural disaster called? What is that called? So this is called a wind shear or microburst supercell. So these wind shears can bring down an aircraft when they're trying to take off. Supercells, which are essentially enormous thunderstorms, create conditions that produce tornadoes, okay? So first, there has to be a wind shear or a difference in wind speed or direction, which create that spinning tube of wind, right? The updrafts and downdrafts are common in supercell storms and then pull these tubes into vertical position, creating a tornado. All right, what do we have here? Our next picture, what do you see? What is this? It's a lightning strike, right? And a lot of times we see these during thunderstorms and severe storms, right? So when lightning strikes a beach or strikes sand or sandy soil, it fuses together the grains to create a small grass-like tube known as a fulgurite. They are not only prized by collectors, they are also of great scientific value in demonstrating past occurrence of lightning storms. So if you ever see one of those when you're out walking on the beach, it's caused from a lightning strike. It says lightning is one of nature's most recurrent and common spectacles. Around the world, there are over 3 million flashes every day. That's around 44 strikes every second happening on our planet at any given time. So a lightning strike is actually the width of your thumb and hotter than the sun. While the intensity of lightning strikes can make them appear as thick bolts across the sky, the actual width of a lightning bolt is only about 2 to 3 centimeters. And the average length of a lightning bolt is about 2 to 3 miles. The charge carried down in this small channel is so intense that the temperature of the lightning reaches 3,000 Celsius. That's 5 times hotter than the surface of the sun. Can you believe it that people actually get struck by lightning every year? Lots of people get struck by lightning and live to tell the tale. And in even rarer cases, some people get struck by lightning more than once in their lifetime. That is incredible. All right, looking at our next photo, what type of natural disaster is this? What would we call that? We've been getting a lot of them, right? They're forest fires. Yeah. So more than 100,000 wildfires occur in the United States each year. Natural wildfires occur when lightning strikes dry or dead wood or plants, creating a spark, and wind and air make the fire spread. And because of water shortages, wildfires have been particularly common in recent years. That's why when we go camping, we have to make sure that we put our fires out, right, properly. Sometimes fires are started by accident, sometimes by fireworks. All right, our next photo. What type of natural disaster is this? What type of natural disaster is this? We just had one in Texas not too long ago. This in particular is called a blizzard or an ice storm, or you could call it an Arctic freeze. So another name that you could call it is glaze storms. Because the landscape becomes covered with smooth, transparent layer of ice, they call it a glaze. It's so heavy that it can split trees, take down power lines, and shut down entire cities with damage. Here in Texas, we lost a power for the whole state pretty much. And that also caused us to lose water. So always keep a candle around if you live in those cold areas and some extra blankets to stay warm. Here's our next picture. What type of natural disaster is this? What's happening in this picture? Have you ever seen one of these? It's an avalanche. Avalanches can reach speeds of 80 miles per hour in as little as 5 seconds. So what makes an avalanche? Right? Sometimes loud sounds can get one started and spreading off. Other times it could be somebody walking on very soft snow, and just one or two snowballs going down gets the whole snow moving, especially if it's not packed in. And interestingly enough, skiers can cause an avalanche, right? Because they're up there on the soft snow. The survival rate for victims rescued within the first 18 minutes of an avalanche is greater than 90%. In rescues between 19 to 35 minutes, survival rates drop 35%. It's important. Dogs play a very important role in finding and locating people who've been buried under the snow during an avalanche. Our next picture. Can you guess what type of natural disaster caused this? What type of natural disaster is this? It's an earthquake, right? Of all natural disasters, earthquakes are both the most unpredictable and the most destructive. While scientists have a pretty good idea of where an earthquake might hit, there's still no scientific methods of predicting exactly when they will happen. Right? So in 2011, a 9.0 magnitude earthquake off the coast of Japan caused a deadly 23-foot tsunami in the country's north. The tsunami disabled the power supply and cooling of 3 nuclear reactors in Fukushima plant, triggering the nuclear accident. The Japanese earthquake also amplified the rotation speed of the Earth, shortening the length of a day by 1.8 microseconds. Some scientists believe that some animals are able to feel vibrations in the earth before an earthquake actually takes place. Dogs, birds, and elephants have all been said to flee or retreat an area right before a disaster hits. All right, here's our next picture. What does it look like? How would you describe it? What type of natural disaster is it? They're called sinkholes. Although they look like just a big hole in the ground, they are called sinkholes. The state of Florida sits on an unbroken bed of limestone, which makes sinkholes a common problem, especially in Central Florida. It's called Sinkhole Alley. 2/3 of sinkhole insurance claims come from this area. The Great Blue Hole of Belize is a large underwater sinkhole near the center of a lighthouse, Lighthouse Reef. It originally formed as a limestone cave during the last glacial period, but as the ocean began to rise, the cave system flooded and eventually collapsed. In 1971, Jacques Cousteau made the site famous by declaring it one of the top 10 best diving sites in the world. The largest natural sinkhole ever witnessed occurred in May of 1981 in Winter Park, Florida. The sinkhole grew to a width of 350 feet and a depth of 75 feet, taking with it a 3-bedroom house, a car dealership, 5 Porsches, and parts of 2 separate streets and the town's Olympic-sized swimming pool. That is a large sinkhole. All right, our next natural disaster. Can you guess what it is? What is it? I'll give you a hint. We had one of these and they called it the Dust Bowl, right? A drought. A drought. So droughts can last as long as a week, a month, a year, or even more. It's caused by lack of precipitation in an area and is one of the major causes of drought, right? Due to lack of water for crop irrigation, drought can also affect the food chain, resulting in famine. As the climate warms, droughts become more and more common. So this is something that we're facing now, right? All right, next picture. What type of natural disaster is this? It's an aerial view of a neighborhood surrounded by water. What is it? Floods, right? A flood. So floods are the most common natural hazards in the United States. A homeowner with a 30-year mortgage in a 100-year flood area has a 1 in 4 chance that such a flood will occur and more than double the chance of being damaged by a flood than a fire. Floods can happen everywhere. It just depends on whether the risk is high, medium, or low. People outside of the high-risk areas or the 100-year floodplain actually file over 20% of the flood insurance claims and receive 1/3 of disaster assistance for flooding. All right, here's our next natural disaster. What is this? What would you call that? It's called a landslide, right? Or a mudslide, depending on where you are. So landslides develop when water rapidly accumulates in the ground and results in a surge of water saturated rock, earth, and debris. Mudslides usually start on steep slopes and can be activated by natural disasters. On steep hillsides, debris flows begin, and shallow landslides that liquefy and accelerate tend to cause it. A typical landslide travels at 10 miles per hour, but can exceed 35 miles per hour. What type of natural disaster is this? What would we call that? It's called a tidal wave. A tidal wave is a shallow water wave caused by the gravitational interactions between the sun, the moon, and the earth. Tidal wave was used in earlier times to describe what we now call a tsunami, right? Take a look at this picture. Could you imagine being on the beach and all of a sudden a big wave comes? The good news about tsunamis, though, is that typically the water recedes quite a ways out before it comes back with a monstrous wave. So that gives you some time to get off the beach pretty quick. So a tsunami is an ocean wave triggered by large earthquakes that occur near or under the ocean. Volcanic eruptions, submarine landslides, or onshore landslides can cause large volumes of debris to fall into the water, and this could also cause a tsunami. On the surface of the open ocean, a tsunami wave may be less than a foot tall and are usually not noticed by sailors on the boats, right? This is because the wave is contained within the depths of the ocean. Usually by the time we know a tsunami is coming, it's pretty almost close to being late to do anything about it. Tsunamis move across the ocean at the speed of up to 500 miles per hour, which is about as fast as a jet plane. Moving at that pace, they can cross the Pacific Ocean in less than a day without much energy loss. A tsunami is not actually a single wave, but a series of waves known as a wave train. Many people have described tsunamis as sounding like freight trains coming by. All right. Our next natural disaster. What would we call this? Notice in this picture how we see waves, but there's this one part in between where it's just kind of foamy water and it's flat. That's called a riptide or a rip current. You know, a riptide is present by looking between the waves. You'll see a break. That's how you'll know, and you want to stay away from those. Rip currents can be very narrow or more than 50 yards wide. Sometimes a rip current ends just beyond the line of breaking waves. However, others may continue to flow hundreds of yards offshore. Rip currents do not pull people under the water. They pull people away from shore. All right. I hope you enjoyed this game. See you guys next time.